I think it's something they need to pass. I think it's something that needs to be consistent with what Bluffton, Hilton Head, and Beaufort is doing. It makes it easier for citizens to understand as they travel through the county that the rule is the rule everywhere in the county, instead of, all right, what do I do here on Hilton Head? Okay, I'm in Bluffton now. What do I do in Bluffton? I mean, that creates a lot of confusion for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, the practical matter to all of this is that we have a crisis, and it needs to be treated the same everywhere in the county. And people that are coming to Beaufort County to vacation in Beaufort County are coming from somewhere within the United States or somewhere within the country or other countries that are being allowed for travel. They're dealing with a pandemic just like we are. So to show up in Beaufort County on vacation and be oblivious to what's going on with COVID-19, that's not going to work. They're coming from a place for vacation that's dealing with the same problems that we're dealing with here. So, mask, gloves, social distancing, that's something that's being stressed and taunted throughout the United States. So don't show up in South Carolina on Hilton Head to go on vacation and act like there's, like this place is, completely rid of any COVID-19 issues, because we're not. But everyone's welcome. Welcome that's out. But when you get here, there are going to be rules that need to be applied while you're here. I think they're fairly simple. Simple compliance. Wear your mask. That's kind of the compliance that we're looking for. But we'll have those that will resist, the opportunity or the direction by others, and we'll have to deal with those on an independent basis.
What are you telling your deputies about enforcement?
We're actually having a staff meeting right now, and we're going through the multiple ordinances that we've seen. We're going through the town of Hilton Head's ordinance, which is for the most part final. I mean, I think it's pretty well done. If there's any modifications, there may be minor, maybe a word here or there, not a real big deal. Then we'll go through the county's ordinance tomorrow, after 4 o'clock, depending on how it's voted, and then we'll apply that. But our deputies are very professional. They're professional at what they do. They police with common sense. Even though a lot of policing is tradition, the reality is this is not a traditional policing environment we're in now because of COVID-19. There was no playbook, there was no rule book. So we're trying to kind of create the tradition as we go, and it's working fine, and they're handling it very, very well. But these men and women go out every day. They deal with a lot of controversy on any given day. In an issue like this, where it may be redundant, multiple times a day, dealing with the same set of circumstances, about mask wearing or gloves or social distancing and some of the other things that we do. They're very, very coordinated in their efforts right now, because we've been dealing with this since March. So there's a new set of guidelines today or tomorrow or whenever those ordinances come into place, and for the most part, nothing's been relaxed. Things have been allowed, but I guess Justin Thomas kind of kicked things off with his comment, being on Hilton Head during the RBC by basically saying this place is a zoo. And I think that's unfair for him to make that comment. I mean, he shows up to play in a golf tournament. The PGA Tour did a wonderful job, of regulating, the players and the attendees that were volunteering, the caddies and the staff and everyone else. Everyone was tested, and basically tested every day. And I don't know that he went to any restaurants, because he stayed in a private villa with his own chef. So him going to a beach or going to a restaurant and basically referring to Hilton Head as a zoo may have been a little harsh on his part. I do agree, based on my travels throughout the county every day, that when things started opening back up, and our restaurants and our bars, and we started seeing more more people show up. I know the restaurants and the establishments are trying to do their best in keeping, 50% inside, looking more at outside dining and all the things. They're trying to do their best to survive, through this process. And it's been a long, drawn out process, but we are no way out of the woods on this issue. We've had a real surge in numbers over the past several weeks. A lot of that's because we're dealing with thousands of more people in the county that we were dealing with in April and May. So the tourist numbers are up. You can look at the traffic counters and tell that they're up. And we're dealing with more testing too. So we're dealing with 10 times the amount of tests that we were seeing used in April and May. And of course, the scary thing for a lot of our citizens is that there are more positive tests because we're having more testing and we have more people in the county. So those are two red flags that alarm our citizens throughout the county. And geographically, some areas are more alarmed than others. But Hilton Head, for an example, based on maybe Justin's comment and based on what the town of Hilton Head did, they elected to create an ordinance that required people to wear a mask, and I think that's a good start on Hilton Head's part, and I think Bluffton, Beaufort, and Port Royal, and Beaufort County, and possibly Yamasee will do the same thing. And I think we need to do this and evaluate over the next couple of weeks, what those numbers represent. Keeping in mind, with the 1,600 or 1,500 tests that were done yesterday on Hilton Head, and looking at what percentages could be a positive, it's going to make those numbers rise even more. But at the same time, evaluating the positive test results with maybe residency is something that's important as well. Because a person could be here on vacation and saw the news about testing and could take an opportunity to go be tested, and they may be gone today or going back Friday or Saturday or Sunday to go home. So there's a lot of things you have to take in consideration, but the mask wearing proposal in the ordinance, I think, is beneficial to the community at large. I know that it's going to be a challenge for us to enforce it. We understand that. There are other calls for service that we need to, our principle, and this is secondary to some extent, even though they're both very, very important. But if we have a hot call that's ongoing, like a domestic or an armed robbery or even a severe traffic accident, those things take priority over someone calling in about no one wearing a mask at a certain establishment within the town or the county. So, those things we'll have to, we'll just have to work through it and do the best we can to make sure we answer all those calls. But we're going to spend a lot of time on the front end of this educating a lot of people. Even though they don't need to be educated about COVID-19, they need to be educated about the requirements and the conditions while they're visiting Beaufort County and while they're visiting or vacationing on Hilton Head based on the ordinance on the town and the ordinance with the county. So it'll be a challenge, but it's not something that we can't handle, and we'll handle it just fine.
How strict are you telling your deputies to be when it comes to this? Are there going to be warnings, or you believe that absolutely you're out there without a mask, you're going to get a ticket?
The deputies will use common sense, and they'll use their own discretion when it involves maybe a citation or a verbal warning or a written warning. There's a caveat in the ordinance, of course, that multiple offenses on a particular location could impact the licensee for the location. So it could have an impact on a business license. They could be considered a nuisance location, and that's not a good thing under the town's ordinance of a nuisance. So, we're going to be very discreet as we do this, but we're also going to be very mindful of how this will impact our recovery in the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're going to be very conscious of everything they do. They'll use common sense, they'll use their discretion, and they'll write tickets when tickets need to be written, and they'll give warnings and verbal warnings when they feel like they can accomplish the mission by doing that and then moving on to the next call. So I mean, that's the only way that we can go about this. Now, to come out and say that we're going to be heavy-handed and everyone that doesn't have a mask is going to get a ticket and it's going to be a $500 fine, and when you go to court, you may be subjecting yourself to, you know, a 30-day jail sentence. I mean, I know that sounds severe for, you know, something like not wearing a mask, but I mean, I think on the front end, you have to let people know we're serious about this, and we are serious about it, and we're going to take a serious approach, understanding that we've got to be fair, we've got to be consistent, we've got to use common sense, and officers need to use their own discretion. So as far as me dictating when a deputy will write a ticket or not write a ticket, that's not something I do. They're very professional, and they know when they should or should not, and their job is to accomplish the mission, and they'll do it in multiple ways, and I am very comfortable with them doing that. But it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, because you're walking a fine line with this, because you have to support this ordinance or else the ordinance has no teeth. But at the same point, you don't want to go out and be heavy-handed like you talked about and sort of destroy the tourism aspect to it.
You know, the tourism aspect for Beaufort County is important, but the public safety aspect is what I consider. You know, and how those mix, they'll just have to mix. But when it comes to the tourism, I'm looking at public safety, and we're going to make sure that the general public is protected as much as possible. Our citizens are concerned about COVID-19, which they should be, and I know that our tourists and our guests are concerned as well, because they've been dealing with the same thing at home where they came from. We just want everyone to work together. Be respectful to each other. You know, when it comes to people needing to go to a grocery store, needing to go to a pharmacy, needing to go to a Walmart or a Home Depot because they need to, you know, do some minor repairs at home, places that they need to go there feeling like that they're not going to be exposed. And if they take the proper precautions and wear their mask, know how to wear them, which is extremely important, then everyone should do the same thing. So, but when it comes to a restaurant or a bar, or maybe going shopping at a retail store, you know, those are options that individually you need to consider. So if you want to go to a restaurant and go out to eat, if you're here on vacation, you probably are going to do that, and that's kind of normal. But if you're a resident of Beaufort County and you go to a restaurant and it's a little too crowded for you, you have the ability to go somewhere else or go home. So, you know, making that decision based on, you know, the facts that are presented to you when you show up at a location like that, you need to make the appropriate decision on that. But when it comes to our citizens need to go grocery shopping, our citizens need to go to the pharmacy, our citizens need to go to a doctor's appointment. And we want to make sure that when they do that, that when they get there, they feel comfortable and they don't feel like they're in a hot spot of exposure. So we're going to be very, very clear on that throughout the enforcement. There's certain areas that are kind of a zero tolerance, and there are other areas that we're going to have to be flexible based on the crowds. The beaches, for an example. You know, our beach patrol officers, they're going to be outnumbered, probably 1,000 to 1. So, you know, they'll do their best. They'll make sure that people are educated in that process. Our public parks throughout the county and our public areas, you know, if people are being realistic and they're being reasonable and they're social distancing and they're doing all the things they need to be, then, you know, we're not going to create an encounter. We'll monitor, and then we'll actually go, instead of looking for minor infractions, we'll look at major infractions and we'll educate those as well. If a ticket needs to be issued, it'll be issued. And then we'll you know, handle anything and everything else within the court system when that court date comes around.
But if somebody sees this, are you waiting for calls? I mean, are they supposed to call the sheriff's office and tell you what's going on? Or are you guys going to be patrolling for this? How does that go?
A combination of both. And, you know, and one of the things that I asked the town to consider, and I'll ask the county to consider it as well, and I've asked all the municipalities, you know, we have a large contingent of firemen within the county. And you know, often these men and women are at the station waiting on a call. I know they do a lot of jump truck type work, but we're also asking that our firemen also go out and in their normal course of a day, if they can take an opportunity to go to a shopping mall or to a grocery store or a Walmart or one of these, and stand out front and educate the public as well while they're coming in. If there's no hot calls going and there's nothing going on, and they can help us educate the general public by stressing, wearing the mask, and if people see it, and if we go all hands on deck and take that approach, and people see that we're serious about what we're talking about, and know that it will have a good result for us locally, I think in general people are going to do it. You're always going to have those that want to buck the system and don't want to follow the rules. We understand that. We deal with that every day, but we'll deal with those independently.
But you don't want them to call 911 and say
They
Bobby
will.
doesn't have a mask.
I wish I could tell you what number to use. We prefer to use the non-emergency number, which is the 524-2777. It's 843-524-2777. We prefer that you use that number, but we also are asking the town of Hilton Head, because of their dispatch center, to also utilize their dispatch center to take a lot of these calls. And instead of funneling those calls through the 911 system, which can be overwhelming at times. We went through this when we identified New York and New Jersey and other areas as hot spots, and then all of a sudden, these plates started showing up in Beaufort County, and we had hundreds of calls about seeing particular license plates in certain neighborhoods.
To 911.
Oh yeah, and we checked them out. And at that time it was, of course, the governor's executive order. If you come here and from a hot spot, then you had to quarantine in place for 14 days. And that was the rule. And I think that was a deterrent. And I think a large reason for that language was for it to be a deterrent. And I think it worked. But there's no deterrence on this. I mean, it's a simple rule. It's a simple ordinance. It does have criminal penalties as far as the town of Hilton Head's ordinance, and the county's ordinance will be criminal as well.
You don't expect anybody to go to jail necessarily for not
I
wearing
hope
a
not.
mask.
I hope not. I think if, just no pun, but if push comes to shove and an officer has to deal with someone who is in violation of the ordinance, I'm sure there will be other issues that will come about if a custodial arrest needs to be made. But we hope it doesn't come to that. I would not like to see someone go to jail for not wearing a mask. But at the same time, these officers have a job to do, and they're going to do their job. And there's a simple compliance to all this. Wear your mask. And it's an easy compliance. And if you're doing things for the right reasons, and the right reasons is not only, if you don't care about yourself, please care about other people. And the mask, you're going to have those that say the mask doesn't work, and they don't do anyone any good, and I understand that. Half of me feels the same way, and the other half feels differently, so it's kind of that middle of the road. But, if anything, just have enough respect for other people to wear the mask. And if you're a COVID-19 carrier, then contain that within yourself, and the mask may do some of that. But one of the things that we're looking at doing with the county channel, and we may also get you to do something with us on this, we're going to have some medical staff actually do a video showing people how to wear a mask and how to wear gloves. Because almost every day I see so much exposure, when people think that they're being safe. And, putting on a mask, and then in the morning time when you leave your house and taking it off maybe for lunch, or taking it off when you get home, and knowing how to remove it without any exposure of your hands to the mask, and throwing it away properly, unless it's one of those you can wash. I think the gaiters are being used by a lot of people because they're actually more comfortable than masks, and if you have 2 or 3 of them, you can always have a clean one. I think those are easier. But when you have a mask on and you're messing with that mask, or you take it off and you fold it up and you put it in your pocket because you're going to eat lunch, or you just are in your office and you don't need one there, the exposure is all over your hands. It's in your pocket. I was in a restaurant was probably about 5 weeks ago, and this was, after the RBC cancellation, and then when a restaurant started opening up a little bit where you could have a small percentage based on your square feet. Was in a restaurant, and I saw an older couple come in, a more mature couple come in. They came in through the door, they sat at the table, and I watched them because they had on masks and gloves. And they sat down, they went through the menu, and they ordered. And then when their food came, and the waiter put it on the table, she took her mask off, folded it up, put it in her purse, and then took her gloves off like she had just left a ballroom dance, folded them up and put them in her purse. Well, everything that she had handled with her gloves on has now exposed to her hands. And everything that was on the front of her mask, if there was, like material for COVID-19 material in front of her mask, once she took it off and folded it up and put it in her purse, she contaminated everything in her purse. Her hands are contaminated, her purse are contaminated, and then she put them on when they were ready to leave. And the sad thing about that is where people think that they're doing the right thing to protect themselves. If you don't know how to wear the mask and how to dispose of mask and gloves, you're actually creating a false sense of security for yourself, and you're really exposing yourself to a lot more if you hadn't worn the mask or the gloves. So, the sanitizer is a big deal. Using that multiple times, keeping your hands out of your face, washing your hands every time you get a chance, wearing masks when you're in crowds, keep your hands off of it. And if it's a disposable mask, then don't touch it. And then when you get ready to take it off and put it in the trash. Because that mask is no good. And now the ones that you can wash and clean, we actually encourage those because PPE gear sometimes is hard to come by. So if you've got the mask that you can clean, you need multiple masks. In other words, you need 3 or 4 or 5. And you always have clean masks. So when you do, take one off, and make sure that you know which side. So if it's a mask that's got colors in it, and I'm sure you have seen some psychedelic masks out there. I don't know if both sides of what I've seen are the same, but if it's a mask and you can't determine which side you had previously at your face, when you unfold it out of your pocket and you put it on differently, then all that exposure that could be related to COVID-19 is now against your face, and your face side is now out. So, all of those things are serious. We want people to wear masks. We're going to enforce that ordinance, but we want people to have a greater understanding of what the masks are designed to do, and how to put them on, how to take them off, and how to get rid of them, and those things are extremely important. I think those things about the mask and the gloves is probably as important, but probably less important than it is for using stuff, washing your hands and keeping your hands out of your face. If you can go about your day by staying away from people that are sick, if you see someone sneeze in a room, stay away. Don't go. You don't go to big crowded places, because you're going to be uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable in that environment. If you wear a mask in that environment, understand, how to deal with them. And I think how many movies have we watched where we've seen surgeons are in there washing before surgery, and they come out and their hands are like this, and they've got someone else putting gloves on them, and they've got someone else putting a mask on them. All of that's done for a reason. They're sterile. But that's an environment. So does the mask work? If the mask did not work, then surgeons wouldn't use them while they're doing surgery. So it's important, but again, I think it's important. It's something that we need to do. It's something that we're going to do, and we're going to try to make the best out of it, and hopefully our citizens and guests will understand and work with us and not against us in the process.